Hello, everybody, and welcome back to my football predictions. We are on the penultimate week of the NFL regular season, week 17. A lot of things happened in week 16, a lot of teams trending in all sorts of different directions. We're going to go over them in these predictions. So, let's kick it off. So, first up, we have the Dallas Cowboys at the Tennessee Titans. This is exactly what I was saying about two teams trending in two completely different directions. Cowboys, they have clinched the division. They have not the division, they've clinched the playoffs, so they're the number 5 seed right now, which is a pretty solid spot for them because they're going to be playing whoever wins the AFC South. Not the AFC, the NFC South. That's the division with the Buccaneers, the Falcons, the Panthers, and the Saints. So like a really weak division. So the Cowboys are actually in a good situation to succeed. They end up losing that game. It's pretty pathetic, but I digress. They had a very impressive win against the Eagles. They beat them 40-34. Granted, it was against a backup quarterback, but it was still a very good showing by the Dallas Cowboys. Dak Prescott was 27-35 for 347 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. 124.3 passer rating. And then CeeDee Lamb had 10 receptions for 120 yards and 2 of those touchdowns. Extremely impressive showing by the Cowboys and their offense. They gave up 34 points, but, that's the Eagles are a top team. They're moving up. A team that's not moving up is the Tennessee Titans. They lost to the Houston Texans 19-14. Now, I know the Texans have been close to defeating a lot of teams this season and coming up short, like against the Chiefs. They went into overtime with them. But the Titans actually ended up losing to them. This is their 5th straight loss for the Tennessee Titans. And then something that I think is even more concerning is in those 5 losses, they didn't score more than 17 points. That is a huge concern. If you're not putting up over 17 points like that, yeah, you're going to lose some games. And Malik Willis is still playing like a quarterback who shouldn't be a starter. He was 14 of 23 for 99 yards, 2 interceptions, and a 34.5 passer rating. I don't care if you're a rookie, those type of numbers are absolutely unacceptable. You can say, he's a project or whatever, but at this point, it's that kind of play that made, as a Commanders fan, Dwayne Haskins so bad, we needed to get Taylor Heinicke in there. Especially with, the Titans are playoff hopefuls, right? They were in control of their division for the longest time. The Titans losing 5 straight means that at one point they were 7-3. They were comfortably in the lead of their division, and they've just completely lost track in this second half of the season. Derrick Henry was his usual self. He had 23 carries for 126 yards and a touchdown. Those are typical Derrick Henry numbers, but if he's the only guy on your entire offense that's being productive, it's no wonder they can't score more than 17 points. With the way both of these teams are trending, I'm going to be going with the Cowboys. The Titans have already given up the division to the Jaguars. They need to make some huge changes and right the ship, or else they're going to miss the playoffs. So I'm going with Dallas on this one. All right, guys, so we're going to get into it pretty early just because I have a lot to say about this. The Cleveland Browns at the Washington Commanders. This is an incredibly important game for the Commanders. As you know, they lost to the Giants, which was a disappointing loss, and then they lost to San Francisco, which, to be honest, was a bit expected. Like I said in my last video, I didn't expect them to beat the 49ers. They played a lot better than I thought they were, though. The fact that they were tied 7-7 at the half is pretty good. Then, the 49ers got up 21-7. Then, Taylor Heinicke drove the ball down the field pretty quickly, and we fired back with a score. The thing that killed us were those back-to-back interceptions. There was the strip sack fumble by Joey Bosa that, you can say whatever you want about Heinicke having trouble fumbling. You put any quarterback in that situation with the Defensive Player of the Year, because I think he's going to win it, the Defensive Player of the Year, sacking your quarterback from behind in his blind spot, any quarterback's going to fumble that ball. So I can't blame Heinicke for that. I can blame him for the interception that he threw the following drive. That was all him. He thought, I watched it, he thought Brian Robinson was going to continue on his route instead of stopping on the spot, and he threw the ball where he thought Brian Robinson was going, and it was right at a San Francisco 49er defensive back. Like, that was on him. But other than that, he played, like, let me just get the stats out of here first. Taylor Heinicke was 13 of 18 for 166 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, 114.6 passer rating. So he had a good game with the exception of those 2 fumbles. I do think that taking him out of the game was the right move just because he had back-to-back turnovers, just for clearing his head, right? I don't think that Carson Wentz should start against the Browns, though, because, like I said, Heinicke played well against San Fran for the most part, you know, with the exception, like, of that interception and that other fumble. So now they're 7-1. They still are the 7th seed. This win puts them way in front. They can technically clinch if the Lions, Seahawks, and Packers all lose. Looking at who the Lions play, that's one team off the top of my head that I don't think is going to lose. But if we lose to the Browns, we don't deserve to be in the playoffs. Like, this is a team we frankly should beat. They lost to the Saints 17-20. If you're losing to the Saints, like, you're not a very good team. Deshaun Watson has continued his incredibly mid performance for the season. He's 15 of 31, 135 yards, an interception, and a 47.1 passer rating. Like I said, I didn't expect him to be good because he's been away for so long and he's had to learn the playbook kind of on the spot here. Sorry about that. I just yawned. But he's kind of had to learn the playbook on the spot here. So he has not been put in the best position to succeed, right? So that's why I'm going to have to go with the Commanders on this one. Like I said, if they're a playoff team, this is a game that they frankly should win, right? Every sign points to that. I do think Taylor Heinicke should still start. He still has a better win-loss record than Carson Wentz. He's the one who kick-started us into being playoff contenders in the first place. I would stick with Heinicke. I'm going with the Commanders. So next up, we have kind of a throwaway game. The Arizona Cardinals at the Atlanta Falcons. Neither of these teams are going anywhere, so I'm just going to kind of glance over things here. The Cardinals lost to the Buccaneers 19-16. The fact that the Buccaneers had this much trouble getting rid of the Cardinals with their third-string quarterback, I think says a lot about Tampa Bay. The Cardinals are looking like one of the worst teams in the league right now, and I think going into next season, they'll be one of the worst teams in the league as well. Because they don't have Kyler Murray, and they won't have him for a majority of the season. For the Falcons, Desmond Ridder was 22 of 33 for 218 yards and an 85.2 passer rating. They lost to the Ravens 17-9, so they didn't even get in the end zone once. I think it's smart that they're using Desmond Ridder just to see what they have instead of trying to compete. So they're doing what's right at the moment, but they're 5-10. They're not going anywhere. I'm going to go with the Falcons. They're a team that's in less of a greater rebuild than the Cardinals, so I'm going with the Falcons. So next up, we have the Chicago Bears at the Detroit Lions. Now, this is what I was saying, right, about the Lions not losing this week. The Lions losing to the Panthers last week, that was a big loss for the Lions. You have an opportunity to get a game above the Commanders here and actually slot yourselves into the playoffs after you've won five, 6 straight games, and they blow it against the Carolina Panthers. What I've gathered from that is no matter how good the Lions' offense is, their defense is so bad, it's going to keep them out of the playoffs. So like I said, it was a bad loss against the Panthers. They really needed this. Now they have to fight against the Seahawks and the Packers to take the 7th seed from the Commanders. Jared Goff was 25 of 42 for 355 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 110 passer rating. So that was a lot of garbage time, though. They were down by a lot. The 23-37 score makes it seem like it was a lot closer than it actually was. The Lions were never in this game, and those 3 touchdowns came in garbage time. As for the Bears, they lost to the Bills 35-13. I feel like everything I say about the Bears every week is the same. They have Justin Fields and nothing else. Justin Fields is one of few 1,000-yard rushers. He has more rushing yards than a lot of running backs on a lot of other teams, which I think is kind of interesting. But again, his passing still leaves a lot to be desired. He had a decent game here, though. He was 15 of 23 for 119 yards, a touchdown, and a 92.5 passer rating. So he played decently, but it's in Detroit. This is a game the Lions need to win. They are basically eliminated if they lose this game, because then they're going to be a game. I think they actually mathematically will be eliminated, because if the Seahawks or Packers win, and especially if the Commanders win, they're done basically. So I'm going with the Lions on this one for their playoff hopes. So next up, we have the Denver Broncos at the Kansas City Chiefs. Talk about the worst playing against the best here. The Chiefs, for what it's worth, have had a pretty easy schedule when you really think about it, because they played Houston a couple weeks ago and they played Denver twice. But, they're still the Chiefs. They're still a force to be reckoned with. It's really weird. I don't know how many of you guys watch That's Good Sports, but the guy who hosts it's a Broncos fan. He has this series where every time the Broncos lose, he says it's the new worst Broncos game, the new worst Broncos game. Every single loss that the Broncos have just keeps getting worse. There was a point in this game where Russell Wilson had more interceptions than completions. At the end of the day, he was 15 of 27 for 214 yards, 1 touchdown, and 3 interceptions for a 54.2 passer rating. The Broncos lost to the Rams 14-51. 51 is more points than the Broncos score on average over the course of, because they average 14 points a game. So you're talking the Rams scored more points in this game than the Broncos on average score in 4 games, which is just, it leaves me speechless. Nathaniel Hackett has been fired, so he is now on a short list of coaches that have been fired before the first season. He joins Urban Meyer, who last year, and then Bobby Petrino, who quit. He wasn't even fired. He left. He ditched his team. But yeah, this is a new low for the Denver Broncos franchise, honestly. And it's going to be interesting to see how they pull themselves out of it, because they got to find someone. They got to find someone to coach this team and maybe just squeeze the life back into Russell Wilson. I don't know if he's washed, if he he was a system quarterback in Seattle and that's why he was so successful. It's two huge extremes with Russell Wilson, with his career in Seattle and what he's done in Denver. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the next coming seasons, to see if Russell Wilson really was, to put it simply, a massive fraud in Seattle. I have my own take on Russell Wilson. I am planning on releasing a autopsy on the season when the regular season's over, going over what I think happened in my expert opinion. But they're not going to be defeating the Chiefs here. There's no way that's going to happen. The Chiefs are at the maximum of their powers. They beat the Seahawks 24-10. Patrick Mahomes had 3 touchdowns for the day. He's the front runner for the MVP. I'm going with the Chiefs on this one. So this next game is going to be pretty interesting. We got division rivals here. We have the Miami Dolphins at the New England Patriots. Now, first things first, the Dolphins have lost 4 straight. That is bad. There was a time where I believe they were the number 3 seed, and they've squandered it. So they've lost 4 straight. That means at one point they were 8-3. Very similar situation to the Tennessee Titans here. And Tua has really, really regressed. He was 16 of 25 for 310 yards, a touchdown, 3 interceptions, and an 80.8 passer rating. I watched his game against the Packers. Some of those interceptions were bad. I can't remember which one it was, but the one where he overthrew it against Tyreek Hill, that's a bad interception. You can't overthrow a guy that much at the NFL level, or else you see what happens. You lose the game. For what it's worth, Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill still played well. Jalen Waddle had 5 receptions for 143 yards and a touchdown, and then Tyreek Hill had 4 receptions for 103 yards. So they're still getting their receptions in, but the Dolphins team as a whole is regressing. And to make matters worse, Tua is in concussion protocol yet again. He has had a rough go of it in terms of concussions, obviously. And the fact that he's in concussion protocol again has led some people to think that he was concussed while he threw those interceptions, and that's why he was playing so badly. It makes me start to really feel worried about his health. If he's having another concussion, and he's playing through them after what happened early on in the season, that is very, very concerning. And I think that Tua is on pace to have a very short career if he can't shake these concussions. You know what happened with Luke Kuechly, who he retired early because he thought he had problems with concussions. Many guys have had their careers cut short. And I think that if this keeps happening to him, he's going to be advised to retire. As for the Patriots, they are still alive. They are still trying to claw their way out of that embarrassing loss they had against the Raiders. They are also 7-8. They're a game behind the Dolphins. Right now, the Dolphins, I believe, are the only wild card spot that can be taken in the AFC. They lost to the Bengals 22-18. They were down 22-0 at one point, so they almost came back and won, but they ultimately didn't. Mac Jones was 21-33, 240 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 105.6 passer rating. The Patriots are a very average team. They have a great defense, but nothing else is really exciting about them. And I think that that's what's going to keep them out of the playoffs up against some other teams that are a little bit better, that are in the hunt. In this game, though, I am going to go with the Patriots, though. I think Bill Belichick, he plays the Dolphins twice a year. I think he's such a defensive mind that he knows how he's going to be able to scheme against Tua, especially if Tua doesn't play. And if the Dolphins lose, they run the risk of, once again, missing the playoffs and having a disappointing season. It's a very Miami Dolphins thing for them to do. But I'm going with the Patriots. So this next one should be a gimme for the home team. We have the Indianapolis Colts at the New York Giants. The Giants have kind of had a rough second half, except against us. They have lost 4 of their last 6. The 2 games that they haven't lost were against us, where they tied and then they beat us. Really bizarre, right? Like, I think they just have a winning formula against us. I have no idea. But in their last 6 games, in the 2 games they didn't play us, they lost all 4. But if I remember correctly, I'm going to go confirm right here, all the teams that they've played have been against good teams. So they lost to the Vikings, they lost to the Eagles, they lost to the Cowboys, and they lost to the Giants. So in their defense, they have lost to good teams, which is why I don't think they're going to lose to the Indianapolis Colts. The Indianapolis Colts, I think, are a bottom 3 team right now. Nick Foles threw 3 interceptions in their game. They only scored 3 points. They're a team in disarray right now. They're in a desperate need of a rebuild. You know, Jeff Saturday is not going to be their coach going into next season. They have a lot of problems. The Giants are vying for the playoffs. I believe a win here clinches for them. Daniel Jones was 30 of 42, 334 yards, a touchdown, a pick, 92.8 passer rating. Again, they fought valiantly against the Vikings. The Vikings just had a last-second 60-yard field goal to win. The Cardiac Kids do it again. This is how the Vikings have won all season. So I think that might be more on a knock for the Vikings finding ways to win versus the Giants blowing a lead. So I'm going to be going with the Giants on this one. I think they're going to have no problem defeating the Colts. So next up, we have the New Orleans Saints at the Philadelphia Eagles. As we know, the Eagles lost to the Cowboys. It was with a backup quarterback, and they just barely lost. So that alone tells me the Eagles are a complete unit. You know, their star quarterback is out, sure, but they still held their own against the Cowboys with a backup quarterback. I am really excited to see the Eagles play in the playoffs because I think they're just in a different tier than everyone else. I think they're in the same tier as the Bills and the Chiefs and the 49ers. I think it's those 4. If those are the 4 that end up in the championship games, I think it could go either way. So they're looking really, really good. Devonta Smith had 8 receptions for 113 yards and 2 touchdowns, and then A.J. Brown had 6 receptions for 103 yards. Jalen Hurts should be back for next week's game. Gardner Minshew did what he could. He was 24 of 40, 355 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and an 84.9 passer rating. So it was a very par-for-the-course game for a backup quarterback. I don't think the Eagles are going to have any problem with the Saints. I think they're going to beat the Saints comfortably, and I think they're going to advance to 14-2. 14-2. Okay, guys, so this next game has huge playoff implications. We have the Carolina Panthers at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Bucs again have hobbled their way to their 7-8 record. They have not looked good all season. Brady has not looked good all season. The Panthers, on the other hand, have turned things around mightily. They've won 4 of their last 6, so they've gradually started to kind of put pieces back together, because I remember when they fired their coach, and everyone was saying they're going to be one of the worst teams in the league. They've battled back very valiantly, and they've scored 37 points against the Lions. The Lions have a bad defense, but scoring 37 points regardless, I think, is an impressive feat. Sam Darnold was 15 of 22 for 250 yards, a touchdown, and 121 passer rating. Incredibly impressive performance. And then Deonta Foreman having a very surprising season as well. He had 21 carries for 165 yards and a touchdown. So again, another very impressive showing. And if they beat if they beat the Buccaneers, they will have the same record. They will both be 7-9. But the Panthers will have a better divisional record, so they will then take the division crown. And then it'll all come down to Week 18 to see if the Panthers steal the playoffs from Tom Brady. If the Buccaneers lose this game, this will be the first losing season that Tom Brady's ever had. And we may be finally looking at the end of the greatest quarterback to ever play the game. I mean, I personally think he can still play. I think he could be successful on a different team, but it's going to be up to him. For what it's worth, Mr. Tom Brady, he was 32 of 48, 281 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions, a 71.6 passer rating. What I was saying about when I went over the Cardinals, the fact that the Buccaneers had to settle for overtime to beat the Cardinals is a problem, because the Cardinals are a bottom 5 team. The Buccaneers are the head of their division. They should not be struggling this much with a team who's on their 3rd string quarterback. Like, that's just bad. That's a loss in my book. The fact that they didn't just beat them black and blue. So I'm going to be going with the Panthers on the road, upsetting the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and taking the division crown from them. So next up, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers at the Baltimore Ravens. These two played each other a couple weeks ago, with the Ravens coming out on top just barely. The Steelers have gotten more and more comfortable as the season has gone on, however. So the Steelers have won 3 straight. They've won 5 of their last 7. And they are in position to finish above 500. After this, I believe they play the Browns. Very winnable game there. So the Steelers, if they beat the Ravens here, could easily be above 500. I remember when they were like 1-5, and I said, all right, their consecutive seasons above 500 is going to end, which they've had since 2003. Kenny Pickett, I think, is finally starting to settle into the offense. It took him a couple games, but he's been getting better each and every game. He was 26 of 39, 244 yards, a touchdown and interception, and an 81.6 passer rating. So he's developing very well. As for the Ravens, they have limped into the playoffs. In their last 6 games, they have scored more than 20 points only once. They have struggled to put points on the board, to say the least. And these are against bad teams, too. We're talking like they scored 17 against the Falcons. That's not good. You know, these last couple games haven't looked bad, you know, since the Panthers game, I'd say. They beat the Panthers 13-3, but that game was very close. They lost to the Jaguars in embarrassing fashion. They barely beat the Broncos. They barely beat the Steelers. They lost to the Browns in embarrassing fashion. They only scored 3 points. And then they beat the Falcons 17-9. They desperately need Lamar Jackson back. But the question is, they've already clinched the playoffs. So are they going to want to put Lamar back in and risk him getting hurt again? I wouldn't be surprised if they kept playing Tyler Huntley. Because like I said, they've already locked the playoffs. And they may be looking at just being 100% for the playoffs. That benefits the Steelers. And it's why I'm ultimately going to go with the Steelers in this game. It's just the Ravens are one of these teams that's going to limp into the playoffs, and we may see an early exit from them. But I'm going to be going with the Steelers for this game. All right, guys, so next up, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars at the Houston Texans. The Jaguars at 7-8 have taken the AFC South from the Tennessee Titans, a division that early on in the season we said was theirs. They have squandered, and it is now the Jaguars. The Jaguars peaking at the right time. Trevor Lawrence showing us what he's really made of at the right time. They are really, really progressing nicely. Trevor Lawrence was 20 of 31 for 229 yards and an 86.6 passer rating. And then Evan Ingram with another good game. He had 7 receptions for 113 yards. So yeah, like I said, they're peaking at the right time. They're facing a very beatable Texans team. The Jaguars could very easily end up 9-8 and maybe could surprise some people in the playoffs because they will be the number 4 seed, which means they'll be facing the number 5 seed. Right now, if I am correct about this, the number 5 seed is the Baltimore Ravens, which is a very beatable team right now. So we may be seeing a very surprising playoff run by the Jacksonville Jaguars. So don't be surprised if it happens, because I predicted it. We'll wait and see, but it looks like they could be on track for that to happen. I'm going with the Jaguars here. This should be a pretty easy game for them. So this next game, we have the San Francisco 49ers at the Las Vegas Raiders. There's one thing that I learned from the San Francisco 49ers watching them play against the Washington Commanders. They have the best offensive and defensive lines in the NFL. They were beating us on the line of scrimmage on virtually every single play. It's a miracle we were able to move the ball as easily as as well as we did, and the fact we were able to even score 20 points to begin with, because the San Francisco 49ers have been preventing teams from scoring that high pretty much all season. Like, I'm just looking at some of the stuff here. They have only allowed a team, so this is crazy. I just looked at it. So they have allowed a team to score more than 20 points 2 times against the Falcons, when the Falcons scored 28, and then the Chiefs scored 44 against them. So other than that, no other team has scored more than 20 points against them. They, like, when I saw that they were the number 1 overall defense in terms of yards and points, I saw it in the game against the Commanders. The 49ers have a legit defense. Their offense has tons of weapons as well. Brock Purdy was 15 of 22, 234 yards, 2 touchdowns, a pick, and 114.6 passer rating. And then George Kittle had 6 receptions for 120 yards and 2 touchdowns. George Kittle torched our secondary. It was really bad. And I think they're going to do the same thing against the Raiders. The Raiders had a bit of a resurgence in the midpoint of the season where we thought they had a chance, but it seems like they just kind of blew it away in this as the season came to a close. Derek Carr threw 3 interceptions. I think this team might just be cursed. Derek Carr needs to go to a different team ASAP. If you want, you can come to the Washington Commanders. We'll treat you really well. We got good wide receivers. But yeah, the 49ers are going to win this one pretty handsomely. My only concern is if we make the playoffs as the 7th seed and the 49ers keep playing well and the Vikings lose a game, then we'll have to play the 49ers in the playoffs, and you can kiss that goodbye. The Vikings are very beatable. The 49ers are not. I'm going with San Francisco on this game. So this next game is going to be a very, very interesting one. We have the New York Jets at the Seattle Seahawks. The reason why it's interesting, both of these teams have lost 5 of their last 6. So both of these teams were in prime position to make the playoffs, and they both let it slip in the second half of the season. The Seahawks are looking a bit fluky, and for the Jets, they have just struggled with their quarterback the entire season. Their loss against Jacksonville, like, that's the death of Zach Wilson. He's not going to start another game in New York. They may be able to trade him, but his time as a New York Jet is over. It's one of those definitive games where it's over. He was 9 of 18, 92 yards, interception, 41.9 passer rating. Just like Malik Willis, those kind of stats are unacceptable. You can plug in a quarterback from the spring league, and he would play better than that. I mean, Taylor Heineke's done it. That's proof right there. So, yeah, it's been bad. Mike White is cleared, and he will play, though. So they may be able to take advantage of an extremely weak Seahawks team. Because, again, the Seahawks lost to the Chiefs 24-10. They have also lost 5 of their last 6. The magic that they had going on early on in the season may have diminished. For that reason, I'm going to be going with the Jets. A loss here basically eliminates Seattle, and for Commanders' sake, I hope it happens. So I'm going with the Jets on this one. So this next game, we have the Minnesota Vikings at the Green Bay Packers. The Minnesota Vikings desperately trying to keep their number 2 seed, and the Green Bay Packers are desperately trying to stay into the playoffs. The Green Bay Packers have won 3 straight. They're on pace with the Lions and Seahawks. They're peaking at the right time. It's just, it may be too little too late. It's so weird how the Packers season has gone, because at the beginning of the season, they got blown out week 1, but that happened last year. Then they were 3-1. They were looking like the regular Green Bay Packers. Then they went on a 5-game slip. And then after that 5-game slip, they won 4 out of their last 6. So it was just that little pocket. They would face the Giants, Jets, Commanders, Bills, and Lions. Those 5 games. Granted, those are all some pretty good teams. The Jets were at the height of their powers there, and so were the Commanders. But, now it feels like the Packers are getting, the same mojo back. So from that perspective, if they actually do make it into the playoffs, I think they're very dangerous. They don't have the target on their back of being the number 1 seed. They could do some damage, like they beat the Dolphins, which, the Dolphins are kind of regressing, but they're getting back into it. The reason why I'm saying all this is because this game against the Vikings may not be so cut and dry. I could easily see the Packers beating the Vikings here, despite, the Packers being 7-8 and the Vikings being 12-3. Because we all know how the Vikings have been winning a lot of their games. Fourth quarter comebacks, game-winning drives. And then the last week's game against the Giants was no different. Kirk Cousins was 34-48, 299 yards, 3 touchdowns, 107.9 passer rating. And then Justin Jefferson had 12 receptions for 133 yards and a touchdown. And then TJ Hawkinson had 13 receptions for 109 yards and 2 touchdowns. So another last-second victory by the Vikings. The question is, will they be able to keep doing it? Will the Packers get this victory? It's really interesting because, again, my heart wants me to root against the Packers because if the Vikings win, that's another team that the Commanders won't have to worry about. Looking at it here, there's a chance the Vikings beat the Packers. There's a chance the Jets beat the Seahawks. I don't think there's a chance the Bears beat the Lions. But anyway, I digress about that. In this game, I'm going to have to go with the Packers. Unfortunately for my Commanders, I am going to have to go with the Packers. I think that they are kind of peaking at the right time. They're hitting their stride at the right time. The only problem is it too little too late? And one way that we could really close it out is if the Commanders win out. That's the best way that it can happen. So yes, I am going with the Packers. So now we got our Sunday night game. We have the LA Rams at the LA Chargers. So basically it's a home game for both teams. But surprisingly, one of these teams has already clinched, and it's not the defending champions. The Chargers, to their credit, I was dogging them a little bit midway through the season. The Chargers are now 9-6, and they have clinched a spot in the playoffs. And they did that by winning 4 out of their last 5 games. So big props to the Chargers for being able to pull that off. I'm rooting for them. I really like Justin Herbert. I want to see him get some success in the league. He was 24-31 for 235 yards and an interception for an 84.7 passer rating. So didn't exactly do a whole lot in his game, but, he still led them to a 20-3 victory over the Indianapolis Colts. And then Austin Eckler, once again, 18 carries for 67 yards and 2 touchdowns. He does what he does best. They are going to be facing a team that the Rams had a huge moral victory against the Broncos. Baker Mayfield has gotten the Rams 2 victories. Not saying he's going to beat out Stafford for the starting job, but what Baker Mayfield is doing here with the Rams, I think he could have very easily have done with the Browns before Deshaun Watson came in, and his stock would be pretty high. Honestly, it's really weird for me to say this, but I would rather have Baker Mayfield over Carson Wentz or, even my man Taylor Heineke. I love Taylor Heineke, but I think Baker Mayfield has a bit more physical intangibles that Taylor Heineke doesn't have that I think would help us. So, as a bridge quarterback, I wouldn't mind taking Baker. I still think we should see what we have with Sam Howell first, though, but that's just how that is. And then everyone else on the Rams did well because they scored 51 points. Cam Akers had 23 carries for 118 yards and 3 touchdowns. And then Tyler Higbee had 9 receptions for 94 yards and 2 touchdowns. So, again, they had a very, very good showing against the Broncos, but Broncos are arguably the worst team in the league right now. So, Not a lot of consequences in this game, though. I am going to be going with the Chargers, though. They're riding high. Bolt up. Okay, so this last game on Monday night is looking like it's sizing up to be a really damn good game. We might see a rematch in the playoffs of these guys. We have the Buffalo Bills at the Cincinnati Bengals. So the Bengals have now taken the AFC North from the Ravens. So that makes them the number 3 seed. Yeah, they're the 3rd seed now, right behind the number 1 seed Buffalo Bills. This is a big game because if the Bills lose and the Chiefs win, which the Chiefs should win in the game that they're playing against the Broncos, the Chiefs may be now the number 1 seed. This is why I like having only one first-round bye. It gives teams like the Bills something to play for at Week 17. Both of these teams are coming off of wins. The Bengals almost lost their win. They were up 22-0 against the Patriots, and they just barely squeaked by, beating them 22-18. That's what a good team does. They don't let an inferior team come back and beat them. Joe Burrow was 40 of 52 for 375 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, a 99.4 passer rating. And then T. Higgins had 8 receptions for 128 yards and a touchdown. Once again proving that even though Jamar Chase is on the roster, he is still a number 1 receiver. So, very impressive there. As for the Bills, Josh Allen was 15 of 26, 172 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and a 71.3 passer rating. He threw 2 picks, but his team still scored 35 points to defeat the Bears. I think that, it's going to be difficult for them in the playoffs. I think that we may see another surprising exit from them. As much as I want to see them win, they are still one of the favorites, but throwing 2 interceptions against the Bears, you can still win. I don't think throwing 2 interceptions against the Bengals will net the same thing. The same goes with Joe Burrow. He also threw 2 interceptions. This is going to be a very interesting game. I'm going to be going with the Bengals, though, because I think they're just a bit more hot right now, and I think that they may upset the Bills here. It's going to be a great game, though. I recommend anyone and everybody to go watch it. So, those are my predictions for the penultimate week in the regular season. Now it's time to go after the playoff picture. So the playoff picture is really getting down to the nitty-gritty. A lot of teams have already clinched. We'll start off with the NFC like we always do. 4 teams have clinched. The Eagles, Vikings, 49ers, and Cowboys have all clinched the division. So not much to talk about with them. In the hunt right now, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are still the number 4 seed at 7-8, but the Panthers and Saints are still right on their tail. They're both, the Panthers are 7-8, the Saints are 6-9. So a win by the Panthers goes very far. They take the division basically. The Giants are 8-6-1. They're sitting pretty comfortably. I believe a win will lock them. And again, the Washington Commanders 7-1. So they need to beat the Browns. Frankly, they should beat the Browns, and that'll really make things a lot easier for them. So there are 5 teams on the bubble right now. The Seahawks, Lions, and Packers are all vying for the Commanders' spot. They're all 7-8. If any of those 3 teams lose and we win, they're eliminated. So all 3 of these teams are going to need to win. With the Packers and Seahawks, those are tough games. They may lose. The Lions win, they're still in it. If those teams lose, they're out. As for the Panthers, the Panthers aren't 7-8. I don't know why I just said that. They're both 6-9, the Panthers and the Saints. They both have a chance here. If the Saints win and the Panthers win, the Saints are still alive. If the Bucks win, basically if the Saints win, they're still alive. If they lose, they get eliminated because either the Panthers or the Bucks are going to win, and that disqualifies any of them. So a lot going on in the NFC. Some teams barely fighting for it. Let's just hope my Commanders can hang on. Now it's time for the AFC. Boom. Here we go. We have 5 teams that have clinched. The Bills have clinched. The Chiefs, Bengals, Ravens, and the Chargers have all clinched. Similarly, the 4th seed is still up for grabs. The Jacksonville Jaguars are 7-8, and the Titans can still regain that lead if they win out. but they have a tough game against the Cowboys on Thursday. A loss will basically eliminate them if the Jaguars end up winning. And then we have the Miami Dolphins at 8-7. They are being chased by the 6-9 Raiders. A lot needs to happen for the Raiders to make it in. The 7-8 Steelers, and the 7-8 Jets and Patriots. So right now, the Jets and Patriots, as well as the Steelers, are all vying for the Dolphins. And again, the Dolphins had this in the bag. I believe they were the number 3 seed at one point. I think they were even the number 2 seed at one point. And they have massively regressed. And with Tua now going out, the Dolphins may not even make the playoffs. Very unfortunate. If I had to pick between these three, the Patriots, Jets, and Steelers, honestly, I would have to go with the Steelers because the Patriots have not looked good. They've lost 2 straight. The Jets have really not looked good. I do think they are going to beat the Seahawks, though, because Mike White will be playing. But I don't think they're going to have enough left to win out. I think the Steelers, like I said, they've won 3 straight. I think if any of those 3 teams is going to win out, it's going to be the Steelers. As for the Titans, I guess they could technically still get in through the wild card, but they need to get their act together. They need to say, hey, listen, guys, we still have many outs to get back into this. We need to do something. If Malik Willis keeps playing, though, I don't think they have a shot. So those are my predictions, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all so very much for watching once again. We're getting down to the nitty-gritty. My next video will cover the very last week, and then we're on to the playoffs. I just hope the Commanders are going to be a part of it. So, I'll see you guys later. Take care.